Hi everyone, welcome to Truth and Fertility. My name is Haley. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their cycles so they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy, but also to manage their fertility. Today we are talking about postpartum depression. I just had my third baby not long ago, and with all of my babies, I've had some sort of journey with depression, whether it's pregnancy-induced depression or postpartum depression. And with my son, who is my first child, I was actually in the hospital 1 week after he was born with severe signs of postpartum depression. So this is something that is really near and dear to my heart. I have learned a lot of tools and methods throughout my journey of childbearing that have helped me. And this time around with my third baby, who's napping right next to me, you can't see her, but she's napping right next to me. She's 7 weeks right now as I'm filming this. I did something a little bit different this time around than I've done with either two of my other kids. And it was a total game changer. So stick around to hear more about my story and what I did to help with my postpartum depression this time around. Okay, so research shows that 1 in 7 women are affected by postpartum depression after they give birth to their baby. So this is a very common thing to happen. The reason it is so common is because when women give birth, the placenta, which is attached to the uterine wall throughout the pregnancy, that is what is giving you progesterone and estrogen. These are these two main female sex hormones that I talk about in a lot of my videos, but those are the placenta is what is in charge, really the main one in charge of producing progesterone and estrogen just to help with the pregnancy moving along healthy, right? So during childbirth, the first thing that usually comes out, well, I guess the water comes out, and then the baby comes out, and then the placenta comes out. You also have to birth the placenta. That is part of the childbirthing experience. And so when that placenta is birthed out, those hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they drop rapidly. And so this is what causes just a very normal amount of moodiness or mood swings because it's all hormonal fluctuations, right? There's a major drop in our hormones as women when we give birth because of that placenta leaving us. And so that major hormone drop is what causes our mood to go wild. Sometimes that's with depression, sometimes that's with anxiety, even anger, frustration. You feel a little bit more on edge. Plus, you're probably not getting as much sleep as you had before you had baby, right? And so with all of those things, that can cause a normal amount of some moodiness, or maybe if you've heard of the baby blues, right? The baby blues are what is known as basically the first 2 weeks after childbirth. It's really normal to feel a little bit down and a little bit anxious, and again, A, because of those hormones dropping so rapidly. B, you're not getting a whole lot of sleep. And C, when you have a new baby, I don't care if it's your first or your 100th, like it is going to be a change of your family, right? Adding in a new human into your family. That is a major life change. That is a transition. However, the baby blues are much different than actual postpartum depression. Postpartum depression is when you're having that, and longer. So basically what postpartum depression is when those baby blues, when they get to the point where you're maybe having suicidal thoughts, or you can't even get up in the morning, or you're getting so anxious that you're crying every single day, or when you notice that there is something wrong, women have an intuition to know I'm not okay, right? So there's definitely a difference between the baby blues and actual postpartum depression. And so kind of getting into my story a little bit, when I was pregnant with my son, who was my first baby, I was working full time during his pregnancy. And so I don't think I had the time or space to really even recognize the fact that I was depressed. But when I stopped working around December, and then my son actually wasn't due until February. So I had about a month, like basically the whole month of January, to just be pregnant and wait for baby. And during that month, I finally had the time and space to recognize I don't feel okay. I just felt more down, and I had some crazy weird thoughts coming to my head that were just really scary. And so I finally got to a point where, and I didn't tell anybody about it either. That was the biggest issue, is that I wasn't telling anybody that I was experiencing this. But then when I literally probably had my son a week later. It was very, very towards the end of my pregnancy. I remember being in my kitchen and pulling my husband aside and telling him what had been going on, and that my moods have been crazy. I've been having crazy thoughts. And it was just a downpour. Like, it was the first time I'd said it out loud and that I had felt these things. And so I immediately sought out a therapist, which I'm so grateful that I did, just to get those thoughts out and to talk to somebody professional who's trained to help women going through things like this. And so seeking a therapist was really, really helpful. Then my son was born, and pregnancy induced depression, in my experience at least, got way worse after the baby was born. And I think that's just because of that crazy hormone drop. If I was already feeling depressed and then all of a sudden my hormones crazy dropped super fast, I'm going to feel even more extreme of what I was feeling beforehand. So that's exactly what happened. So my son was born on a Monday, and that following Monday, I was back in the hospital. I remember waking up that morning, and every single day of that first week, I found myself getting a little bit more depressed, a little bit more sad, a little bit more anxious. And a lot of that was revolving around sleep, because my son was a horrible sleeper. That was the main source of my anxiety, was just knowing that I didn't have control over my sleep anymore, right? And so a week later, I woke up that morning, and I just remember I waking up and telling my husband, I'm not okay. I do not feel okay. There's just something wrong, and we need to do something. So we ended up calling my doctor, and my doctor ended up just telling us to go straight to the hospital. And so that's what we did. And I was in the hospital for that day. That's when I started on antidepressants. And I have nothing against antidepressants. If they work, that's fantastic. I do think that it's important to take antidepressants in conjunction with seeing a therapist. And I also think this is not everybody's experience. So I'm just speaking in my experience here, is that I don't like to be on antidepressants for the long haul. I like to be on them in order to kind of, get tools in conjunction with my therapist to then be able to cope without being on them. One of the reasons is just because I don't like the side effects of them. And then I just don't like being on them for the long haul. So for me, they're more of a temporary fix. But when I got the antidepressant, antidepressants take a few weeks to kick in. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to actually start feeling better. So I didn't feel better right away, but knowing, like, having it in the back of my mind, not knowing I was doing something that was going to give me relief at some point, was helpful. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that before we even left the hospital, so kind of going back a week earlier, when I was in the hospital giving birth to my son, I had talked to my doctor again about just, the depression and what to do about it. And before he recommended antidepressants, one of the things he recommended was a progesterone injection. Now, I'll go into this here in much more depth in just a minute, but progesterone injections, basically what they do is they help even out or level out those hormones, because, like I said, when you give birth, those hormones plummet. And so by having a progesterone injection, it just takes that hormone right to the source, right into the bloodstream through the muscles, and can really help just even out those hormones, which can even out your mood. And so he suggested a progesterone injection. And I was like, sure, why not? Let's try it. So I had a progesterone injection before I left the hospital. It did nothing. I felt no different. It just didn't help at all. So therefore, a week later, I was in the hospital. I went on antidepressant. I was on the antidepressant for about 5 to 6 months. And like I said, in conjunction, I was seeing a therapist regularly, either every 2 weeks or every 4 or monthly. And I was really working on coping mechanisms to just help with the depression. One of those coping mechanisms that was really helpful for me was just either going outside or just getting out of the house. When I am stuck in the house, I'm not a homebody at all. And so when I'm stuck in the house, I just don't feel good. And so really just getting myself up and out was huge for my mood. But anyways, so basically I was trying to gain coping mechanisms in order to get off the medication at some point. And I did get off of it at around 5 or 6 months postpartum with him, with my son. Fast forward about 2 years with my daughter. One of the first signs that I was pregnant with her is that I started feeling depressed again. And it came really, really quickly. And it was just, here we go again. Okay, this is going to be a norm. And so I immediately got back on the antidepressant, and I was on it throughout my whole pregnancy and up to about 5 or 6 months after she was born, my second, who's my daughter. And I felt fine. They worked fine for me. Again, it's a temporary thing in my head. And so I felt comfortable taking it. My doctor was working with me on that. I was seeing my therapist. And so temporarily through pregnancy and through the first 5 or 6 months postpartum with my daughter, I was on the antidepressant to help manage that depression. And I had no progesterone injections because in my head, I'm like, they didn't work last time. I'm not even gonna try it this time. So now, fast forward 2.5 years, and now I have my second daughter, who's my third baby. And I'm seeing a different doctor this time, and I was going to a different hospital. And I had disclosed everything about my past with postpartum depression, pregnancy-induced depression, and she had actually recommended the progesterone shots again. And I told her, I'm like, I had that with my son. It did nothing. And she goes, well, how many shots did you get? And I said, 1. And she goes, you can get up to 5. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. And I don't even think my last doctor realized that, or else I'm assuming he would have offered that. With my second daughter, so my most recent baby, I actually was able to be on half the dose of the antidepressant medication that I was on with my first daughter, my second pregnancy. And so I wanted to be just more cognizant about taking it because I just don't like the side effects of it. So I wanted to try to take less of it. And so I was able to maintain about half the dose throughout my pregnancy that I was on with my previous daughter. So I was like, okay, if I can take up to 5 progesterone shots, maybe we'll just try it and we'll see. And she also told me that I could stay on the antidepressant and getting the progesterone shots because she said most likely your depression may get worse after birth, again, because of that crazy hormone fluctuation. And so that is what I did this time around. And you guys, it was the game changer. It was the game changer. I had 5 progesterone shots. So what happened was when I had already made the plan with my doctor to get the progesterone shots right away. And so you can get up to 5 and you get them every other day. So basically for the first 10 days postpartum, I was getting a shot every other day. And with progesterone injections, because it is an injection we're just going to disclose this. It's an injection, it's a shot in your butt. So, because it's got to go right to the muscle. So with those progesterone injections going right into the muscle, it goes straight to the bloodstream, and it is the most effective way to get progesterone in as quickly as possible and have your body absorb it as quickly as possible. And so some women only need 1 shot, and it just lifts the veil, and they feel totally fine, much better because of those hormones getting balanced. Other women like me need more. So I had my first shot in the hospital before I left. And then every other day I got another shot. My sister-in-law, actually, shout out to her. She is a nurse, and she's actually the one that gave me the shots for the rest of the time. So I'm super grateful to her. So shout out to you. But having those progesterone shots, getting all 5, and just having that plan set in place, I have never had an easier postpartum experience. I think for me, I just needed more than 1 shot. Now, I chose to go all 5. Could I have had less? Maybe, and been fine. But I didn't want to test it out. I was just like, just give me all of them. And when I'm talking about progesterone shots, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but what I'm talking about is a bioidentical progesterone. So this can be made at a compound pharmacy. It's not usually found at your regular like Walgreens, CVS pharmacy. But at a compounding pharmacy, they can produce, or they can actually get bioidentical progesterone. So it's chemically the same exact progesterone that your body produces. It is not, the synthetic progestin that you'd find in a birth control pill or anything like that. It is a bioidentical progesterone. So it helps exactly balance out that progesterone that you lost at childbirth from birthing the placenta. So I got 5 of those, and I mentioned this in my last video of my birth story. Go check that out if you want to hear about that. But I could literally count on one hand how many times I hormonally cried, which is a huge success for me. So it was just a total game changer. Now, this isn't something that is done in normal practice right now. Getting progesterone injections postpartum is, I don't know why it's not something majorly practiced. And I have heard of other friends who actually had to convince their doctors to give this to them. It wasn't just something that the doctor recommended or that they just asked for and everything was fine, they could get it. Some doctors have to be convinced of this. And I think it's mostly because this practice is more founded in something called NAPRO technology. I also have a whole video on that, so I will link that down below if you want to be more informed about NAPRO technology. It's short for natural procreative technology. So it's a women's health science that really tries to focus on curing the root cause of whatever is going on. So it doesn't prescribe birth control for any sort of, for anything, let alone hormonal stuff or any issues reproductively. It doesn't put a Band-Aid on anything. Really, using this health science goes straight to the root of the problem. And so what is the root of the problem with postpartum depression? It is that crazy hormone fluctuation. So if we can put hormones in to balance out that hormone fluctuation, then in theory, you feel better, right? And that is exactly what happened. So I got 5 progesterone shots postpartum, and my mood has just been so even keel. So that is my story with postpartum depression. Getting the progesterone injections, game changer, you guys, total game changer. And if you are sitting here and you are postpartum and you have been having any thoughts of harming yourself or others, if you just have an intuition that something is not right, please go see your doctor. Call them today. See your doctor. Tell your husband or whoever is your support person. Tell them about it. Tell someone. Do not keep it in your head. Please get help. That is the best thing that you can do for you and your baby and for those around you to keep you as healthy as possible. Thank you again for sticking around, and be sure to like and subscribe. That helps me to be able to continue to give you this knowledge on all things fertility, and I will see you guys again next week.